only 2 weeks away, and love is in the air. It's in the stores, that's for sure. Anyone you walk into, pink, red, love, balloons, stuffed animals. I mean, they're trying to tell us that the best way to express your love is through candy, jewelry, cards, things like that. Not terrible ideas, though, but not exactly what we're talking about this morning. So you might think that, we're just being in time with the season with our reading from the New Testament this morning. 1 Corinthians 13, it's the love chapter, right? And it's often read at weddings. It might have been read at some of your weddings. But it's not really the kind of love that Paul was talking about when he wrote this chapter. He really wasn't talking about romantic love at all. It's considered to be a beautiful piece of poetry as well. A lot of people know this chapter well because it's almost like a poem or a song. It's beautiful. In fact, it's good for the music. But really, if we follow what Paul is writing about in the context in which he's writing it, it's really very serious stuff he's talking about. It's probably meant to make us more uncomfortable than put us in a mood of some sort. He's writing to the church in Corinth, and Corinth was a big church. I mean, they were big. They must have been doing something right, because they were large. But Paul wasn't writing to congratulate them on their good work and all their church growth tactics. He was actually writing to correct some serious issues. They had a lot of problems in the church of Corinth. It was full of cliques. They tended to be very elitist towards outsiders. They tend to be pretty elitist towards one another as well, depending on their social class distinctions. They failed to exercise discipline. They allowed all kinds of moral misbehavior to go on in their midst and didn't challenge it. There was no church discipline whatsoever. They displayed a considerable lack of humility and consideration of others. Now, one thing that really excited them was the spiritual gifts that they got as Christians. They thought that was great, especially the really showy ones. The ones that were just big, grand, glorious gifts, not helps, not service, but prophecy and miracles and healings. But they were missing the point. The gifts are given not to build us up. The gifts are given to build up the church. In short, what they lacked as a church was love, Christ-like love. So for all of their self-perceived greatness, when outsiders looked in, and when God looked in, they saw something that really wasn't very desirable. The love that Paul is talking about has to do with the love among Christians, the love that we have for one another in the church. And the kinds of problems that I just listed from the church in Corinth, unfortunately, weren't unique to them. They're quite common in all churches. They might even be common in our church. And he's talking about the kind of love that we're supposed to show each other on a daily basis. So, in that light, if this chapter makes you squirm a little bit, it's doing a good job, because it really ought to make us all squirm. I don't think any of us is able to fulfill the standards that Paul is setting out in this chapter. There's room for growth for all of us. So I want you to turn to this chapter with me, 1 Corinthians chapter 13. It should be on page 1137 in your Bibles. I want us to look at it again real carefully. Page 1137, chapter 13 of 1 Corinthians. We're going to look at the first section, first 3 verses. Paul says, if I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I'm only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have a faith that can move mountains, but have not love, I'm nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor and surrender my body to the flames, but have not love, I gain nothing. Now, one of the most highly prized gifts of all of the spiritual gifts in the church in Corinth was the gift of tongues, the ability to speak in a language that you don't naturally know. And Paul said that if you're exercising this gift for any purpose other than out of love of Christ, you're just making a bunch of noise. And we all have heard gongs and cymbals before. have a cymbal player in my family. It's a loud and jarring sound. Fortunately, she never practiced at home. It's really fortunate. And the gongs and the cymbals, though, that Paul was talking about here were involved in pagan worship. They would have these huge gongs in their pagan temples, and when they would do their parades and processions through the streets, they would carry smaller gongs and cymbals. And the purpose was to rouse the gods, or to rouse the worshipers, or to drive away evil spirits. The bottom line is it was involved in idol worship. So for this self-perceived great church in Corinth that was sure it was full of all this wonderful benefit to the world because of their gifts, to be compared to idol worshipers was probably pretty offensive. Then he says if you have great gifts like supernatural insight or tremendous faith so that you can perform miracles, signs and wonders, if you exercise them without love, it's pointless. He even goes so far as to say if you make the ultimate sacrifice, if you give away all of your belongings to the poor, if you surrender your very life, but you don't do it in love, it's just a meaningless gesture. Now this sounds really harsh. I mean, don't you get points for trying? Apparently not. You see, when we do things, even grand things, out of selfish, self-serving motives, or for our own personal glory and not for God's, we're not really fooling anybody. People can usually see right through it. And certainly God isn't fooled, and not impressed either. Loveless gestures or sacrificial acts may actually, loveless gestures or even self-serving sacrificial acts may end up doing more harm than good. A lot of people don't want to come into church because they think we're all show and tell and no substance. I remember when I was brand new Christian, just accepted Christ and trying to find a church to belong to. Not even a week old in the faith. And I went to one church and they were very strict about certain things. Prayer and Bible study in particular. And you had to do it just the way they did it. Now there's nothing wrong with teaching new Christians how to do things. That's important, but I kind of had the feeling, I had the sense that they were more interested in doing it right for themselves than in helping me learn how to do it as a baby Christian. I needed somebody to kind of help me with my wobbly legs, and they were all, standing at attention. So, it probably set a good example for me to follow, but it left me feeling that I wasn't really important because I wasn't doing it right. It really didn't feel like there was a lot of love. Well, if our lack of love makes it hard for outsiders to see Christ in us, imagine how much it must grieve God's heart. He can't show His glory through us if we don't allow His love to be seen in us. Here's an example I found that I think illustrates this in a real creative way. It says, imagine you have a $50 bill, so you go to buy some groceries. The clerk takes your $50 bill and puts it in the cash drawer. A little later, the manager needs some money to pay an electrician, so he takes that $50 bill and puts it in an IOU and pays the electrician. The electrician realizes he needs some gas on his way home for his truck, so he goes over to the station and takes out the $50 he just got and fills up his tank. The man who runs the gas station has your $50 bill, and the landlord comes, so he takes that along with several other bills and pays the rent. The landlord is going to mail a letter to his daughter who's in a university somewhere, and before he closes the envelope, he sticks the $50 bill in there, just a little love gift to his daughter. A day or two later, she opens the mail, gets the gift, and she's very thankful for her dad, and takes the $50 bill and goes and buys 2 textbooks that she needs. Boy, this was written a long time ago. She makes a down payment on 1 textbook. The manager of the bookstore takes the $50 bill and several others and goes to the bank, and the bank is, he's making his monthly deposit or daily deposit, whatever, and the teller says, "I'm sorry, sir, but this is a counterfeit." Now the bill's gone all over the state doing wonderfully great things. Bought groceries, paid for gas, paid an electrician, paid rent, bought part of a textbook. But when it comes to the bank, where its real value counts, it's discovered to be worthless. In a similar way, it's possible to minister the gifts that God gives you do all kinds of things with it, but when we stand before God with whom only real value counts, if we've not ministered with love, we ourselves are nothing. That's a hard word. That's a very hard word. Okay, so that's the kind of love we're talking about. Let's get a better description. The next section, verses 3 through 7. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It is not rude. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. Paul has just given 15 different descriptions of what love looks like. And not one of them is an adjective. Every one of those 15 descriptions is a verb. The kind of love that we as Christians are supposed to show in this world aren't just warm, fuzzy feelings or good intentions, but actual deeds, actions towards others. Those first 7 really address, if we put them under the spotlight of the Holy Spirit, they address kind of the darkness within us. The way we act towards others. Let's take patience and kindness. He starts out, with a fastball. They're tough. Patience and kindness are tough. I think everybody struggles with it. And patience might be a passive thing, but kindness is a very active thing. Taking the time and the trouble to do something nice for somebody else. And if we look just below the surface of our impatience, what is it you think we find? What do you think is at the source of our impatience? Pride. I think it's pride. We're saying that we don't like our time to be wasted. We don't want to listen to what you have to say. We have things we need to say. I don't want to go where you want to go. I want to go where I want to go. Then Paul talks about envy and boasting. Now, envy is when somebody has something and we want it. Boasting is when we have something and we want you to want it. Two ugly sides of the same coin, aren't they? Again, what's at the root? Pride. We think we deserve what you have. I think I deserve what you have. It's not fair that you have it and I don't have it. Or, the other ugly side, I have something that you really ought to want because it's so great. But you don't, so haha. Rudeness and self-seeking behavior. Do we even need to describe that? We all know what that looks like. But, again, this is placing ourselves before others. We don't have time to be polite. We're in a hurry. Besides, they should have done it the right way anyway. They should have done it the first time we asked. They should have done it this way and not that. The kind of love that we're called to have in Christ isn't touchy and sensitive either, to slights and stings, either real or perceived. Some of us simply take offense too easily. What I've learned is when you take offense, you're making a choice. You don't have to. You don't have to take offense. I bet you 8 times out of 10, the person probably didn't mean to offend you in the first place. And the other 2 times, why give them the satisfaction of succeeding? Yeah, they might have been trying to offend me, but it doesn't have to. Well, the next 3 verbs in Paul's list address the darkness in others and how that affects us. Love keeps no record of wrongs. It doesn't keep lists. We can say we've forgiven somebody, but if we keep bringing it back up, either out loud or in our minds, we've really not released them from our judgment, have we? And there's something in human nature. It says it does not rejoice in wrong or evil. There's something in human nature that does. I mean, how much of the news is bad news? How much of the magazine articles about famous people are sometimes about their foibles and their fallings? And there's just some little tiny twist in us that actually is interested in that stuff. When we need to be looking for the good in others and rejoicing in the good in others, not in their shortcomings and their failures. One of the ways this rears its ugly head in the church is through gossip. Now we'll call it a prayer request. You can call it anything you want. You know, this is something I want you to keep in prayer, but so-and-so did so-and-so or whatever. You know, basically we're airing somebody else's dirty laundry. We don't have a right to do that. The best definition I've ever heard of gossip is telling someone else's situation to someone that isn't part of the problem or part of the solution. They have no business being in that circle of information. Well, the last section talks about the darkness that we sometimes perceive in God. When bad things happen to us, the very thing we often ask is, why? Why, Lord? Or when something bad happens to somebody we love, why, Lord? Why? Sometimes it can be a real faith-shattering experience. It can stop some people right in their tracks. But the kind of love that Paul is talking about, the kind of love we're supposed to have, is a love that chooses to believe in God, to believe the best in God. To know that if we placed our lives in His hands, that He's sovereign. He's in control. We might not understand what's going on. It might seem like everything's crashing down around us. But we have to choose to believe and hope and trust that God is in control and that He will work things out. Romans 8:28, all things work for good to those who love the Lord. Verse 7 in the NIV says, love always protects. Now that, I like the NIV a lot, but I don't like that particular word choice they made, because almost every other version of the Bible you look at, instead of saying protects, it will say bears all things. Yeah. Love bears all things. Or love endures all things. It hangs in there. It hangs in there no matter what's going on, because we know that God is ultimately in control. That our lives are in His hands. And our hope is in a God who loves and trusts, who loves us more than we can ever ask or imagine. So our hope should persevere, and our love should persevere no matter what we face, because love never fails. And of course, He means there God's love. God's love never fails. The last section, verses 8 through 13. But when there are prophecies, they will cease. When there are tongues, they will be stilled. When there is knowledge, it will pass away. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part. But when perfection comes, the imperfect disappears. When I was a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put childish ways behind me. Now we see but poor reflection as in a mirror. Then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. And now these three remain, faith, hope, and love, but the greatest of these is love. What he's trying to say there is love is endless. It will continue on into eternity. All the other things that we have in this life, all the other things that we've striven for and built and tried to achieve, if they've not been done in the love of Christ and for the love of Christ, they're just going to pass away. They're not going to endure. Paul says this very thing earlier in this letter to the church in Corinth in chapter 3. He says that one day our work will be shown for what it is. On that day, which is God's judgment day, it will be brought to light. It will be revealed with fire, and the fire will test the quality of each man's work. If what he has built survives, he will receive his reward. If it is burned up, he will suffer loss. He himself will be saved, but only as one escaping through the flames. The stuff that survives is going to be the stuff that was built on love. Things that we did in love and for love, for God's sake. Now, if you think that what we've been talking about in this chapter here is an ideal that's just impossible to attain, sadly, it may be right. In our own strength, I don't think any of us is capable of this kind of love. But it's a picture of God's love for us in Jesus. He was able to keep this standard perfectly, and He is the standard we look to. He loved us with patience and with kindness. He doesn't keep a list of our wrongs. He's not self-serving. He never fails. He is the example and the standard to which we all fall short. But because He's alive, and because His Spirit is within us, we can love this way. We can. It's a goal that we have to strive for, and we can have success in it. And when we love one another this way, the world will see. They'll see that all of this talk is really about something real. It's the love that we're to strive for as individuals and as a church. Because it's the love that will make a difference. Let's pray. Lord God, it's hard to look at ourselves and see how we've fallen short. But we know that you are faithful and that you are forgiving. Through the merit of Jesus, Lord, we can find forgiveness and healing and a new start. And through your Holy Spirit, Lord, we can do all things through Christ. Lord, help us to love. Help us to love more and to love better, to love more deeply, Lord, and to love more broadly and more generously. Lord, speak to our hearts in this coming week. And when we are drawn towards impatience or self-seeking or any of the other things that Paul talked about, Lord, I just pray that you would help us to stop and remember who it is that we serve and who it is that we love. In Jesus' name, amen. Stand with me and turn to page 2 in our worship book.